And I just wanted to review Chapter 11, Section 1, From Republic to Empire, and go over the assessment questions. So when we see a word like recall or identify, we know that that means that the answer is directly in the text of what we just read, and we just have to go back and find it. So 1A, recall, to whom did Cicero want to give power? Also know that the questions go in order, so I'm going to scroll to the beginning and find Cicero. So the question is, to whom did Cicero want to give power? And the answer is that Cicero wanted Romans to give more support to the Senate and to restore the checks and balances in the government. He wanted to limit the power of the generals. So he wanted to take away power from the army and the generals and give it back to the Senate so that there was a better checks and balances. Question 1B says, making inferences. So that means I have to take a little bit of the information from the book and I have to draw my own conclusion. Why did many senators consider Julius Caesar a threat? Well, Julius Caesar was a threat for many different reasons because he was very, very popular. So as he grew in power, he was very good general and he had lots of strong friends. But the main reason why the Senate was concerned is because they were afraid he wanted to make himself king. He had already named himself dictator for life, and they were concerned that Caesar wanted to become the king of Rome, and the Roman senators were not interested in going back to a monarchy. They liked the idea that they had power and say in the government as well. So the big reason why the Senate was so concerned with Caesar is because they were concerned that Caesar wanted to become king. Question 1C, evaluate. What role did the military play in Caesar's rise to power? So it means I have to take the information and I have to come to my own conclusion if I'm going to evaluate the information. So if I go back to this part about Caesar and his rise to power, I think that the main reason why what role the military played is that he was such a good general and that the average Roman thought that him and his bravery and his battle skills and being a good general was so important that that was the big thing that got him to power. So if his soldiers had not respected him, if he had not treated them well, if he wasn't always winning the battles that he was fighting, then he would not have been able to make himself dictator for life. But the fact that he was such a good general and that his military respected him and they were more loyal to him than to Rome. And the fact that when Caesar was challenged, he was able to defeat his challenger, Pompey. So again, he had that alliance with Pompey, and then they became unfriends, they became frenemies. And Caesar ultimately killed Pompey or had him killed. And so those things all together helped explain why Julius Caesar was able to make himself dictator for life, because he was such a good general and he was so well respected and he was such so skilled at fighting that he was able to always win. So the textbook answer, if I read directly from the textbook on what role did the military play in Caesar's rise to power, it states soldiers respected Caesar. His military success made him a key public figure, and Caesar's army defeated Pompey. So that's question one. That's question one, parts A, B, and C. Question two, identify who took over for Rome after Caesar's death. So Caesar is killed by the Senate. Again, if you recall, there were 27 senators who took place in the stabbing death of Julius Caesar on March 15th in 44 BC. And after he was gone, the two people who took over were Mark Antony and Octavian. So he was not yet called Augustus when he took over. So the answer is Mark Antony and Octavian took over power after Caesar's death or assassination. Okay. 2B, summarize. How did Octavian take power from Mark Antony? So remember, the two of them were BFFs. They were best friends for life until they weren't best friends anymore. And ultimately what happened was Antony divorced Octavian's sister. Octavian took this as a personal threat, and so he went to war, and his army fought Antony's army, and Octavian's army won. So in the end, he defeated Octavian's army, and Octavian was killed in battle. Well, Octavian actually committed suicide rather than being taken prisoner by Octavian and then being killed by Octavian. So the long and the short of it is that the two of them went to war. It was a civil war in Rome, and Octavian's army beat Mark Antony's army. To C, evaluate, why is it significant that Octavian did not take the title of dictator? All right, so again, evaluate means I have to take a look at the information and then I have to kind of summarize it or put it my own words or figure things out for myself. So the big reason why it was important that he didn't take the title of dictator is that he saw what happened to his father, Julius Caesar, that the Senate got very, very scared. So instead, he took the title Princeps or first citizen because it made it look like he wasn't taking all the power. So by not declaring himself dictator, but instead calling himself Princeps and then getting the name of Augustus from the Senate, made it look like he was working with the Senate and not trying to take all of the power, even though he did. So it was all about perception. Again, according to the textbook, the answer is his title of Princeps made him seem like he was not taking all the power, right? So that is, I believe, all of question 2. Let's see, identify who took over Rome. That was Mark Antony and Octavian. How did Octavians take power from Mark Antony? His army defeated him and Mark Antony was killed. Why is it significant that he did not take the title of Princeps? So it looked like he didn't take all of the power. All right, 3A, identify. What areas of the world did the Romans take over? So the easiest way to do this identify is to look at the map. So what areas of the world did they take over? They took over Africa, Asia, and Europe. So that's the easiest way. So parts of Europe, parts of Africa, and parts of Asia is where the Roman Empire was. 3B, elaborate. Why did trade increase during the Pax Romana? All right, so the Pax Romana was 200 years of Roman peace. So if I am going to if I'm going to elaborate, then I have the idea that during this time of peace, that means that there were no major wars or rebellion. It's a time of peace and prosperity. And so if everything is running stable, if they have a stable government and a well-run army, then that makes it really easy to trade. Like, you can go into these different areas of Africa and Europe and Asia, and you're not going to be attacked. And if everyone's taking Roman coins, you know that you have a convenient way to trade. So if I put it all together, there was peace, a stable government, and a currency. So there was money, an accepted currency everywhere. And that's why trade expanded during the Pax Romana. 4A, recall. What type of law is based on the Roman law code? Well, the type of law, it's recall, so I just go back and find it in the text. That type of law is called civil law, or a legal system based on a written code of laws, which we still use today. Drawing conclusions. Latin is no longer spoken. Why do you think people still study it? Well, even though Latin is no longer spoken, it is the basis for a lot of Romance languages, and there are a lot of Latin words that we still use. And science is also a lot of scientific terms are done or are use Latin, I should say. So I think a lot of people still study Latin because it's the foundation for the Romance languages. We still use a lot of Latin words in our everyday language in 2020, and Latin words are common in scientific terms and mottos. All right, so that was my conclusion for 4B. And then question number 5. Reviewing your notes on the Roman accomplishments, describe how the effects of the Roman accomplishment in each of the fields below is being felt today. So I'm going to go back up to this little Roman accomplishment, and I'm going to talk about them here. You need to pick one for each category. So I'll start with government, the importance of written laws. So in Roman times, they had the 12 tables, And then how that affects us today is we use that law code as civil law. And that's how we have our law system, our courts and our judges and our laws that we have today in 2020. Romans actually wanted equal treatment for all citizens, so they tried to make it less important if you were a plebeian or a patrician. So that was how it was in Rome. And then how that affects today is that we also try to make sure that we have equal rights, that everyone over the age of 18 can vote regardless of your race or your gender. So that would be some stuff for government. Engineering, excellent durable roads. So in Roman times, they built their roads in layers, and we still do that in 2020. So we use different materials or different types of materials, but we still use the same general concepts that the Romans invented back during their civilization. Strong bridges, they used the arch. And so the idea of using an arch allowed them to have strong bridges, and some of those bridges are still being used today. And we still use an arch in order to make big, giant, vaulted open areas. Aqueducts to move water. The Romans knew that they needed clean water in order to have less disease. So they built aqueducts to move water using gravity. So they would have to go and get a water source from the mountains and then have it come downhill. In 2020, we use generators and pumps so we can pump water out of the ground, or we can push the water uphill or where it needs to go. Building designs that inspired later societies. In Rome, they used the vault, and so they could have big open areas, and we still use that today. Architecture, large, strong buildings. So the idea of using brick and cement and concrete, they actually invented concrete. We use that today. Columns, they stole that from the Greeks. And then they also incorporated or put together columns and arches to make their open spaces. Their art, they liked realistic statues. That's also something that they took from the Greeks, was lifelike portraits and realistic statues. They were very interested in how the human body looked, and they wanted to make things look the same. So they didn't idealize anything. If you looked that way, that's how they carved it. They didn't want to have like everybody look the same in their pictures. And that helps to how we have art today in 2020. Philosophy, they focused on improving people's lives. And that idea of the Stoic philosophy emphasizing people's civic duty. So again, those are things that they took from the Greeks, the idea that it's your job to participate in government, like it's your job to go and vote for things and to help out everybody else. And that's still something that we see today in 2013. So I know there is a couple different categories as well. So engineering would be anything that's with the building. So engineering or architecture would fit under that first column. Language, we can go back to the language area. We still read things that were written. So the Virgil is a poet. We still read his things. There are playwrights that wrote plays that are still performed in 2020. We still use words like etc., circus, and veto are still there today. Law, we have our civil law and written law codes. So like all of our laws are written down, our school policies are written down so that you can see them. We have a civil law and we have a criminal law or justice system. And literature, kind of, I talked about with language, like there are plays and poems that are still being read today. So hopefully this helps you with the chapter 1 assessment questions for chapter 11, section 1. And just to let you know, in case you don't continue to scroll, here is the Augustus baseball card. So if you're going to do your final project on an important Roman figure, you could pick Mark Antony, you could pick Julius Caesar, you could pick Pompey, you could pick Cleopatra, any of those people, just not Augustus because the example is right here. And then here's more information about the Roman roads. So if you were going to pick the project on building your own Roman roads, this is all the information you need about where they were built. Look, they built 50,000 miles of roads. That's enough to circle the earth twice. And they did that like 2,000 years ago. Like, I just think that's amazing. Here's how they made their roads. So you can see the different layering sections of it and why they built the roads. And some of these milestone markers that you can still see today. So this information is really good if you're doing the Roman roads project, or this information is helpful if you're doing the biography project. If you have any questions, give me a call and an email, text, something, get a hold of me, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.